The call came at 11 at night, and Duchess Isolde Farrow knew, before she picked up the phone, that something had changed. She was 71, and in 50 years of service to the Crown of Aldenmore, she had learned to read the weight of a ringing telephone the way sailors read weather. Her nephew, King Edmund III, did not call late unless the world had shifted beneath him. Aunt Isolde. His voice was thinner than she remembered from the state dinner 3 weeks prior. "I need to see you. Tomorrow. Alone." She didn't ask why. She simply said, "I'll be there by 9, and began packing before she'd hung up the phone. The drive to Draymore Castle took 2 hours through fog-heavy countryside, and Isolde spent every mile of it thinking about her brother's declining health, the palace's careful non-statements, and the particular silence that had settled over the family since her nephew's diagnosis had first been whispered among senior staff. Edmund was 58. He should have had 2 more decades at least. Cancer, it turned out, did not consult anyone's calendar. She found him in his private study, thinner than his portraits, but his eyes were sharp when they met hers. "The doctors have given me months," he said, without preamble. "Perhaps less. I need to ask something of you before I lose the strength to ask it myself." On the table between them sat 2 sealed envelopes, each addressed in his unmistakable hand. One to Prince Rowan, his elder son and heir, and one to Prince Callum, his younger son, who had left royal life for years earlier under circumstances that still made the tabloids salivate. The brothers hadn't spoken in 18 months. Not since Callum's televised interview accusing the institution, and many read between the lines his own brother, of freezing him out. "I did this," Edmund admitted, his voice cracking on the words. "Not entirely. Callum made his choices, but I built the walls that put them on opposite sides of a war neither of them started." He explained haltingly what the letters contained, the truth about decisions made in the aftermath of their mother's death years before, decisions Edmund had made and let his sons blame each other for. Different rules for each boy, different protections, a system invented in grief and fear that had quietly taught one son he mattered less. "I'm not asking you to fix it," Edmund said. "I'm asking you to give them the chance to fix it themselves. You're the only person both of them trust, without reservation. You never played favorites. You just told them the truth and expected them to rise to it." Isolde took the envelopes. She did not promise it would work. She only promised she would try. Prince Rowan received his letter first, delivered by his aunt personally into a study still smelling of cold coffee and unread briefings. He was 41, dutiful to the point of exhaustion, and had spent 4 years absorbing the public narrative that his brother was the reckless one, the disloyal one, the one who'd chosen fame over family. "Your father is dying," Isolde told him plainly. "Months, not years. And before the world finds out, he wants you to read this." Rowan didn't open it immediately. He let it sit on his desk through an afternoon of engagements, through a dinner with his wife, Princess Alara, who watched him carry the envelope from room to room like it might detonate. That night, alone, he finally broke the seal. What he read undid him in ways for years of estrangement never had. His father confessed to decisions he'd never disclosed, staff reassignments that isolated Callum, press strategies that quietly built Rowan up by tearing his brother down, financial arrangements that left Callum feeling like a poor relation in his own family. "I told myself I was protecting the succession," his father had written. "I was really just protecting myself from admitting I could fail you both equally." Rowan read it 3 times. Each pass exposed a new layer of a machine he hadn't known he was operating inside of. He had genuinely believed Callum envied him. He hadn't considered that Callum might have simply been drowning. "He's manipulating us," Rowan said to Alara later, the pages scattered across his desk. "Even now, even dying." "Or," Alara said carefully, taking his hand, "he's finally being honest. And it's easier to call it manipulation than to sit with what it means." That night Rowan called his aunt. "I'll meet him. Neutral ground. No press. Alara comes with me." Isolde didn't hesitate. "Done. I'll call Callum tonight." 9 time zones away, on a quiet terrace overlooking the Pacific, Prince Callum almost didn't answer the unfamiliar number. For years of building a new life had taught him to guard his peace fiercely. But something made him pick up. "It's your father," Isolde said, and delivered the diagnosis without softening it, because Callum had always preferred her bluntness to anyone else's careful phrasing. Then, he's written you a letter. I think you should read it before you decide anything. The letter arrived the next morning. Callum held it unopened for an hour, aware that whatever was inside would complicate an anger he'd spent years organizing into something manageable. When he finally read it, his wife, Sable, found him with tears on his face and the pages spread across his desk. He knew, Callum said. All this time I thought it was Rowan cutting me out. My father knew, and let me believe it was my brother. For 3 days Callum didn't call anyone. He read the letter again and again, cross-referencing it against memories he'd carried like scars. His therapist, in an emergency session, asked him the only question that mattered. The rift, the leaving, all of it. It might have been avoided. What are you going to do with that, now that you know? That night, watching his sleeping daughter in the nursery, Callum told Sable he was thinking of going back. Part of me wants to leave it broken, he admitted. Say I've moved on. But he's my brother. And our father is dying. And this letter says maybe we've been fighting the wrong war the whole time. Sable didn't tell him what to do. She only made him promise to be honest about what he was hoping for. Because hoping for a magical, tearful fix was a setup for heartbreak, and hoping for something smaller and truer might actually survive contact with reality. He called his aunt at 4 in the morning California time. I'll come. But this isn't a palace event. No cameras. No leaks. If I'm doing this, it's private. Agreed, Isolde said. Your father was explicit about that too. This isn't for the crown. It's for the two of you. They met a week later at a remote lodge on the northern estate, chosen by Isolde precisely because it belonged to neither brother's version of the family. No tourist paths, no staff quarters, nothing but stone walls, and a fire that had been lit hours before anyone arrived. Rowan stood rigid by the window when Callum walked in. Neither brother moved to embrace. William, Callum began, catching himself. Rowan, he corrected. And something in the slip made them both almost laugh, which broke the worst of the ice. Isolde didn't let them stand on ceremony. Sit. Both of you. We're not doing this like a state visit. She produced a second folder, not their father's letter, but her own research. Staff records, correspondence, financial ledgers she'd spent a week quietly assembling. Since we're finally being honest, let's be completely honest, she said, and laid out, point by point, the pattern of institutional favoritism that had shaped both their lives without either of them fully seeing it. I didn't know about most of this, Rowan admitted, staring at the documents. Of course you didn't, Isolde said. You were being protected from it too. The conversation that followed wasn't gentle. Rowan admitted, for the first time aloud, that he had envied Callum's freedom even while resenting him for taking it. Callum admitted he'd assumed Rowan had everything, the title, their father's approval, and had never considered that Rowan might have felt just as trapped, just in a different cell of the same prison. We were both wrong, Rowan said finally. We were both prisoners of the same system. We just blamed each other instead of it. They didn't hug. They didn't perform forgiveness for anyone's benefit. But by the time the fire burned low, they had drafted, together, without lawyers or advisors, a short statement neither had thought possible a week earlier. Honest about the distance between them, honest about the work still ahead, unwilling to promise a perfection they didn't believe in. I don't forgive everything, Rowan said as they prepared to leave. Neither do I, Callum agreed. But maybe we can build from understanding instead of anger. Maybe that's enough to start. King Edmund died on a quiet morning in late spring, his sons at his bedside together for the first time in years. His final public address, delivered weeks earlier with his sons standing beside him, had not promised the nation a fairy tale. It had promised something smaller and more durable, two brothers willing to keep trying. At the funeral, Rowan and Callum walked side by side behind their father's coffin, as they had walked behind their mother's a generation before. This time, neither walked alone. Duchess Isolde Farrow, 71 years old, watched from the front pew and thought, not for the first time, that some legacies aren't built from crowns or ceremonies at all. Sometimes they're built from a single hard conversation, finally had, before it was too late to have it.